Yes, 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 folks. My apologies for that. I had to take a phone call. Appreciate you hanging out here at the Voice of College Football. Thanks for your patience. Leave those comments and questions there in the chat. I do believe we've got a call coming in, and we may have a couple media guests stop by to highlight the big games this weekend. Oh, we do have Michelle Gardner stopping by from Arizona Republic. So, Michelle, thank you for being here, and I apologize for the delay.
How are you?
I'm doing just fine. How are you?
Just dandy.
Well, let's dive into this one because I think that the Big 12 is the one conference in America where you really can't pin down the biggest games. So a couple games pop up every weekend, and at least it's my thought that, oh, could this be the biggest game in the Big 12, or could this determine, in late November what the championship race is going to look like? We saw Iowa State, Kansas State from week 0, even kind of start that trend, and we've seen Baylor and Arizona State just a week ago. A lot of people like Baylor in the preseason, and obviously Arizona State's the defending champ, and they walked it off with a field goal. And now they run into another big game against TCU, and this time on a Friday. So what are your preliminary thoughts about this one?
ASU's in a little bit of a trouble from a personnel standpoint. Injury-wise, they got really lucky last year. And I'm going to go and say to win a championship, it just doesn't take being good. You have to be lucky. And ASU got very lucky last year in that they didn't have a lot of injuries, and they're really limping badly right now. They're missing Xavier Alford, one of the best players in their secondary. They're missing their nickel, Montana Warren. And in practice this week, today they lost their corner. And then 5 minutes after he went down, the guy that replaced him went down. I don't know if they're anything serious. I checked the injury report, and one of the players was not listed, and the other player was listed as probable. So maybe they're not too serious, but they're just kind of running on fumes in the secondary right now. And that doesn't bode well when you're playing a team like TCU and a quarterback like Josh Hoover that can throw the ball. So I'm a little bit concerned with that matchup. Now, when you look at what they did last week, where they really did kind of slow Sawyer Robertson down a little bit, maybe that's the formula in this one too, where you keep the ball on the ground and pound and 5-6 yards a clip, which ASU did that very, very well last week and kept the ball out of Baylor's hands. So maybe they have that strategy again. We'll see.
Yeah, so how is that, without looking at the box score, because I did not see the Baylor game, how is that running back distribution looking like?
Well, ASU had about 14 more minutes in time of possession, and that's pretty significant. And again, they just kind of kept the ball on the ground. Now, last week they only had 2 running backs. They had Raleek Brown and Kanye Udo. This week they're going to have Kyson Brown back full strength. He was listed as available last week, but he only carried the ball a couple of times. He really wasn't full go. So Kyson Brown should be more of a full go this week, and that will help. So it wouldn't surprise me if they did that again and they kept the ball on the ground.
So obviously it begins on offense with Sam Levitt, one of the top players in the country at his position entering the season. I see 21 of 32 against Baylor, and 221 yards, did not get picked off. Has he lived up to the expectations, considering that Arizona State's, I don't want to say one of the few teams in the country, but probably in the minority that they've already played 2 substantial opponents, unlike a lot of teams?
I don't think he's lived up to what he can do. Now, it's a little bit tricky because when you look at the Mississippi State game, that was just kind of just a strange game. And for some reason, that was his worst game last year, was Mississippi State last year. And I don't know. I think he's capable of doing more. I just think he's been a tad off, whether it's throws a little bit high or a little bit short or missing guys down the middle. I just think he's just not quite settled in yet. And maybe that's because our expectations of him are so high, given what he did last year, and you expected him to build on that. So the Mississippi State game, he wasn't good. I'd say last week he was decent, but I definitely think that he's better than what he's shown so far. And it's early.
And again, we're just looking at the stats from the Baylor game. And again, everyone, Arizona State walked off with a field goal in this one, 27-24. Jordan Tyson, obviously the star, who missed most of last season, or down the stretch last season, 7 catches, but only 43 yards. How are they approaching the receiving targets? Are they spreading things out, or
no, they're not at all.
Okay.
I mean, that's kind of been a big problem right now. They're still looking for a number 2 guy. Who is going to be the guy on the outside opposite of Jordan Tyson to keep teams from double teaming him and putting all the focus on him? And I actually added up the numbers today. Now I got to see if I can remember this off the top of my head. So there's out of 72 catches, I think Jordan Tyson's got like 32 of them. And then the running backs have, I think, 19 catches. And then the tight ends have 16 catches. So when you look at wide receivers not named Jordan Tyson, there are 2 receivers that have caught a total of 6 passes. So they really are looking for that number 2 guy. I thought it was going to be Jaron Hamilton, the transfer from Alabama, who can really, really fly. He just kind of hasn't found his niche yet. Malik McClain, I thought he had potential. He just seems to be caught up. He seems to get a holding penalty and an offsides every game. So, I mean, and then Jalen Moss, the transfer from Fresno State, he was a potential guy, but he's been sidelined now. This will be 3 weeks that he's been out with different ailments. So I think that kind of is one of the problems with the offense is they're still trying to find that other guy, if you want to call him the other guy.
So, Michelle, to flip back to the defense, because you led with the injury report and your concerns in the secondary, obviously the best way to protect a thin secondary is with a pass rush. So how has ASU been in that department this year?
Actually, much better than last year. That was a real big flaw last year. They've been much better in that regard this year. I believe they've got 11 sacks. 2 weeks ago, they had 5 sacks in a game, and that was the most they had a game in 2 years. So in that regard, I think they're doing much, much better, and they've got a lot of personnel. They're pretty deep on the defensive line. So I think they're very good in that regard. I think Clayton Smith is going to have a big year. He's had a pretty good first few games, and I think he's a draft guy. And he's just a freak athlete with his size and his reach. So I think Clayton Smith is the guy that's kind of leading the charge there. So I think that they're going to definitely do that. They're going to use that and try and, contain Hoover.
Okay, Michelle, my favorite question before we let you go is basically, especially in a situation like this where a lot of people that watch their team on Saturday don't see Arizona State play, but this being the best game on a Friday night opposite Florida State, Virginia, but a more important game, we would think. A lot of people are going to see ASU for the first time this year. Anybody that you've not mentioned that could pop off the screen, maybe a little under the radar, that are keys to this game?
Okay, the guy that I think doesn't get enough publicity is their cornerback, Keith Abney. And I think he's going to be a draft guy too. He's a junior. He was the starter there last year. I don't think he's given up a touchdown. I think I saw something today where he hasn't given up a touchdown in coverage. I believe he was the number 1 ranked Big 12 cornerback last week. And I think he was second in all of the FBS. So I like Keith Abney. And just the kind of the way this kid is, he had a PI that was called on him in the Baylor game, and it was a drive that Baylor eventually scored. And it was kind of one of those either way PIs where, some games it's called, some games it's not. And then 5 minutes later, Keith Abney picks off a ball thrown by Robertson. And so he's just kind of that dog mentality. And he doesn't get phased when something, gets called against him. And so I think Keith Abney is one of these guys that's not getting enough love nationwide.
Michelle Gardner, Arizona Republic, previewing Arizona State taking on TCU. It's a big Friday night matchup in the Big 12. Check out Michelle's work there at Arizona Republic. You see her X/Twitter handle. Michelle, we always appreciate you stopping by, setting us straight on the Sun Devils.
Anytime.
All right, let's keep it rolling here at the Voice of College Football, trying to get to as many of the big games as we possibly can this week. If you want to see the TCU side of that, check out last night's show with Michelle. Melissa Treebwasser from the Frogcast stopped by for that one. A lot of good people here in the chat, a lot of familiar faces and names. Like to see that. We got Christopher Foote. And do we actually have... Did I see this correctly? Is this correct? Can we verify this? Minnie's not just going off wishing Christopher happy birthday just for the hell of it. Are you, Minnie? And by the way, good to see you, Minnie. Okay, we'll get verification on that. Would not want to warm up the singing voice arbitrarily. Okay. All right. Texas A&M, Auburn getting together on Saturday. Big game in the SEC as well. On a day of big games in the SEC, LSU and Ole Miss also going at it, Alabama and Georgia. But we're going to talk Auburn Tigers. We got Kyle Loomis stopping by from the E2C Network, folks. Kyle, how you doing?
Doing well. Nothing exciting happens when Auburn and Texas A&M get together. Never. I mean, not, 3 overtimes. So this should be an interesting game.
It should be. Last week was interesting. Of course, Auburn took a lead after trailing pretty much the entire game with about 7 minutes left and could not hang on for the victory on the road, which would have been enormous. But if anything, it showed that that Auburn's probably going to stick around in this race in the SEC, or at least give a lot of teams fits.
Yeah, you got to, if you're an Auburn fan, certainly you can talk about the other elements of that game if we need to, but you've got to walk away, if you're being reasonable, with some positives about your team there. The one positive you can't walk away from is, or the negative you walk away with is you can't give up 10 sacks. And some would argue that if you give up half of those, you probably win the game. Coach Hugh Freeze's opinion about that is more than anything, the thing that made the difference was the abysmal, is the word I'm using. I think, I forget what he called it today in the SEC teleconference, but the special teams play was not good. Let's just put it that way. But outside of that, the big question was, what's Jackson Arnold going to do? That's what we heard all season. He's returning to Oklahoma for the first time. What's he going to do? We're going to take it to him. I thought Jackson Arnold played pretty well. Wasn't perfect, overthrew at least once. There was another one that looked like an overthrow where Cam Coleman didn't complete his route, or at least didn't run fully. He stopped and had to finish running, and it fell out of his reach. He wasn't as effective running the ball, but I thought, given the circumstances, he did well. I thought the defense showed out after a lot of questions, especially with their defensive backs. So it's really an interesting game to sit here after, because there are so many frustrations about things, but there are also things that that the Auburn could have done to win this one. But also there's some good things too. I know that feels like maybe you can say that every game, but it really is just a unique game to kind of sit back here and digest.
Well, this is probably a better statement for just following the game rather than looking ahead to another big game, because we'll set most of our attention obviously on Texas A&M. But you displayed that post-game review pretty eloquently, in spite of what I got to think for a lot of Auburn fans would be, we got ripped off on that touchdown that the SEC came out and said was an illegal play. Folks, if you're not aware, check it out. Oklahoma wide receiver moving toward the sideline, and there's a whole there's a new set of rules that
Yep.
prohibit what they did, basically. And then
Yep.
there was a scoop and score that I'm sure I know Hugh Freeze made a comment during the halftime interview about, and that not necessarily being properly reviewed. And so those are complete game swinging plays.
Yeah, I mean, you're going there, so I'll go there too. Listen, I think it's important anytime that you have a discussion about the outcome of game, especially if you're the one that's on the negative side of it, that you need to recognize your own issues first, because that just devalues if you want to make a case about the refs altering. We discussed it on our podcast this week that I feel like for the first time I can say that the outcome of the game was altered by the poor decision makings, multiple of them by the referees. Doesn't mean that Oklahoma didn't deserve the win. Doesn't mean they didn't do enough to get to it. Not taking away credit from them, but this left so many questions. I need Oklahoma fans. They're reasonable ones have understood this and acknowledged this. It was an illegal play. You can't deny it just because your guy went and asked the referee at the time and he said incorrectly, "You're good," doesn't make it not an illegal play. And it was practice. So there was a clear effort to be deceptive. There was a clear effort this week to pack. They had 2 plays they got called on for picks. There was a clear effort to kind of try to see what they could get away with. And I'm good with that. Listen, hey, everybody's trying to find ways that they can ride the line of the rules and stuff like that. What can you get away with? If you're not doing that, it means you're not being innovative. So there's no shade for that, but I think it's important to acknowledge that as well. They deserve the win. They got the win, but I do believe that the game was altered. I do believe that was a fumble and a scoop and score, and you just got to imagine what that would have done for that Auburn team just to start that way. The way that Mateer was playing. Now we know he was playing hurt a lot of the game. So it's a lot of this what if scenario, butterfly effects type of stuff, but it doesn't matter. It doesn't change anything. Auburn's 3-1. Oklahoma's 4-0. You get them next time, maybe, if you put a good season together and find each other in Atlanta.
So yeah, spinning ahead to Texas A&M, obviously the crowd, the atmosphere considered to be one of the most hostile in college football. We've got a quarterback in Jackson Arnold who's at this point in his career, he made it through an SEC season at Oklahoma. He then went to Oklahoma, faced that crowd. I don't think that that's much of a storyline in regards to his preparedness for a difficult crowd in the SEC. Mm-hmm. More so a Texas A&M defense that in its one big game of the year gave up 41 to Notre Dame and hung on for a win based on a botched PAT.
Yeah.
So Auburn going up against Texas A&M's defense looks to have some opportunity based on that one big result for Texas A&M that maybe they don't have the defense that they've had in the past.
Yeah, you obviously, well, first, I guess I'll answer the question. Minnie, it is just my iPhone. It's an iPhone 14, I think. So, I mean, it's just, I have an Apple computer, so they connect through what's it called? There's a term for it. But anyway, I mean, that's all it is. I'm actually down. My light's not working, so it probably would look even better if my light
using mine, I guess.
Hey,
all right.
I need to start utilizing an actual DSLR, what everybody, the pros use these days. But it's just worked for me and worked for my system. But I appreciate her acknowledgement of that. I try to have a good show, and I think that it makes it easy. Back to Texas A&M. Yeah, I stress not focusing too much off of one game's results and applying that's going to happen. But you can't ignore that, right? Like, that's a bunch of points for your defense to give up. But Mike Elko is supposed to be a pretty decent defensive-minded coach. Coach Freeze talked about it today on the SEC teleconference. He said that he would describe their defense as more base-oriented and not as many nuances, at least in that they've shown this year. But they do that base defense extremely well. And so you're kind of interested here to see, are they going to try to mix things up? Because obviously Oklahoma had some issues with that. Or not issues. Auburn had some issues with that, as noted there, with 10 sacks. So my guess is that they're going to try to replicate a little bit of that while staying balanced in their base defense, which Coach Freeze says they do really well. Auburn was still able to move the ball. Auburn was still able to find success. You know, one of the questions was, can Jackson Arnold throw the ball down the field? And he did that. Now, he overthrew one one overthrow was not his fault. But he was able to show a little bit more that people thought was there, or at least hoped that was there. If Auburn can get that running attack that they found in the first 3 games, even against Baylor, and that's a decent defensive team as well, they're going to find some success, I think, against Texas A&M. But you can't ignore how motivated Texas A&M is going to be. I remember back in SEC Media Days, they were marking that one on the calendar for the whole overtime, us storming the field thing. So it'll be a fun one regardless.
Yeah, so let's stay with that, because the SEC's been torn apart in regards to divisions.
Sure.
And so a lot of the what were rivalries that we're going to put together no longer exist per se. Is there an angle to this game when it comes to, when Auburn plays LSU? Obviously Auburn, Bama's everything. There's something, there's a storyline, there's a narrative, there's history. Mississippi State, Ole Miss, all those SEC Western Division foes from yesteryear. Is there a Texas A&M angle?
I don't know that there's like a historic angle between Auburn and Texas A&M, although for a while the story was the away team wins. Auburn would go to Kyle Field, they would win. Texas A&M would come to Auburn, they would win. Auburn stopped that. I think it was 2017, something like that. And then it kind of just is whatever, whoever's obviously got the better team wins no matter what the place is. But it was just a weird coincidence that kept happening. Really lately, it's just been Texas A&M, especially when they come to Auburn, keeps finding themselves in very unique situations where Auburn is extremely motivated for some reason, no matter how bad their team might be. You've obviously got last year with the overtime game, Auburn's trying to maintain in bowl eligibility. The year before that, you've got Cadillac Williams in an interim head coach situation. So there's been some weird, like, emotional games in Auburn, but it feels like when we go to Texas A&M, we're always just catching their best. And even if Auburn's in the game lately, that feels like they've been able to squeak out a win and utilize that strong home field advantage. I think outside of that, there's really no other storyline or things like that. I think they're really just seeking revenge for the overtime game and storming the field last year.
I apologize for my line of questioning here. I'm skipping all over the place. I'm going to get back to Jackson
That's
Arnold
fine.
here. 10 sacks. However, I watched the game, but I didn't watch the game like you watched the game. I'm watching 3 games, so
Sure.
I'm keeping track of the game. But I did hear some comments made out there by certain people that did intently watch the game, that even though that's 10 sacks, you were pretty pleased with Jackson Arnold's performance otherwise, but that he held on to the ball too much.
Yeah, that's a big talking point this week. It is a humongous talking point. I think it's sometimes a little bit too obsessed about by certain parts of the fan base and stuff. I'll just go straight. You hear me say this a lot. I really value what Coach Hugh Freeze says. I think he's very forthcoming with information, sometimes too much. He's even admitted that. His assessment on the opening press conference this week to preview Texas A&M and assessing from questions was that of the 10 sacks, 5 were not on Jackson. The other 5 were on him, meaning he held the ball too long, maybe made the wrong read, thus using more time and thus putting his offensive line in a more difficult situation. And we have to remember that those 5 that weren't on him aren't the offensive line, but the running backs, the tight ends, whoever's wide receivers, whoever didn't catch their block for the appropriate amount of time to let that play set up. So it's an equal give and take there. I think it's real easy to pick on the quarterback because Auburn's been saying for so long it's the offensive line, and people don't want to believe that maybe they got a little bit too ahead of themselves because of the pretty decent play of the offensive line in the first 3 games. That second game was a little iffy. I was frustrated by the 10 sacks. Obviously, it's frustrating to see that someone gets a record on you on that one. But I saw all over the place. I saw Jackson holding the ball too long sometimes. I saw just whiffs on the offensive line. One of the things that people aren't aware of outside of Auburn, probably, maybe you heard it on the telecast, was the starting center, who's very well thought of, Connor Liu, went down. This guy, Cale Ellis, comes in. He's barely 17. And while he wasn't perfect, held his own. And so when you talk about good things that you walk away with, I love seeing what the future is going to be like. And if it's one game, I grant you, that's a good in that environment to walk in that young and hold your own until Connor Luke got well enough to come back in. That's impressive. So I know we were talking about Jackson and all that, but just to kind of put all that together, it's a mixed bag of whose fault it was, which is pretty much always the story anyway.
I did see that injury. Do remember that portion of the game, number 52. Yes.
That was a scary moment. I was like, no, can't have that happen. That's going to be the end of this offensive line if that happens.
All right, Kyle, appreciate you stepping by. Everybody check out Kyle's work at E2C Network. And again, it's not just football. It's not just sports. It's the entire Auburn community there at E2C Network.
Yep. We got the new head coach today, Stephen Pearl. So go check that out.
Oh, yeah.
If you want the basketball flair, we got the press conference and thoughts on that. We're always here for you for the Auburn experience.
I was actually on the phone with our resident Auburn fan within the network here when I got that notification. I didn't even know that my phone was set up for sports notifications, but I saw Bruce Pearl retired. He just didn't want to believe it.
It's real. We're living it, man. It's been a rough week. We lost Horatio. We didn't mention that, but we lost Horatio Fields, the wide receiver, today. Bruce Pearl retired earlier this week. The controversial loss. It's been an Auburn week.
Yeah. All right, Kyle.
All right, man. Thank you so much.
Thanks, man. All right. Good stuff out of Kyle Loomis. As always, check out, we got Auburn and Texas A&M playing at the same time. That 3:30 window, and we'll give it a look. 3:30 Eastern is a difficult one to find, to figure out who you're going to watch because it's loaded with good games. And before we take our first call here, I will do a little bragging there. 84-16. That's the money line record. 49-25 against the spread. 14. Let's see. 12-4. 12-4 against the spread this past weekend. 49-25 against the spread. You can get my picks. Patreon, top tier, right here on YouTube, the top tier membership, or you can select those picks on Patreon per week. So if you don't want to sign up the membership for the entire month, you can just get the picks for the week. You also get Corey Bradis picks there, Matt Zemek, Steve Dace, and then our buddy Steve Merrill from Wager Talk with the under the radar selection of the week as well. But check out my picks. All right. Welcome into the voice of college football. We've got Caden stopping by.
Good evening, Mark. How are you doing this evening, sir?
I am doing great. How are you?
Well, between working on machinery within the last 4 hours and then coming home to, you going live, and I figured I'd at least pop my head in, see what's going on tonight.
Yeah. So what is going on tonight?
So I wanted to talk about some of the games this week. I've got the picks of winning. I said it before last week. I said it. I'm going to say it again this week. Particularly Georgia, Alabama. I wanted to talk about that since Jackson Johnson, our fellow resident Alabama Crimson Tide fan, is in the house tonight. I figured at least bring it up to him because we talked about it last week with Jack. Specifically, I talked about it with Jackson last week on the Alabama Primetime Live and the Alabama Call-In Show. I said that they were going to lose at Georgia this weekend by at least 2 touchdowns and a field goal. And the reason I say that is because I feel like Ty Simpson is not really much experienced against Georgia's defense yet because he's just the freshman starter quarterback for, the Crimson Tide. So I feel like Georgia has the advantage in that game mentally. But as far as I'm concerned, I feel like Georgia has the edge in this game, not just mentally, but home field advantage wise. Although Kirby Smart's record 1-6 against the Crimson Tide doesn't stand well, I feel like this game should be the turning point in that, and he would probably go 2-6.
Well, obviously, those games were played against Nick Saban as well.
Mm-hmm.
So this would be the first Kalen DeBoer Kirby Smart matchup.
Right. But also, I feel like I said, I feel like Georgia's defense will bring it in early against Alabama's offense against Ty Simpson. They'll bring heavy blitz. They'll bring heavy man-to-man coverages. They will play heavy, hard defense in the first in the first 2 quarters, and then let Gunnar Stockton and that offense, lay the wood down. So I feel like Georgia has the better. Like I said, I feel like they have the better advantage in this game. And then Ohio State, Washington. I was going to bring this up Thursday, but you know what? I guess I'm going to spoil my pick. Ohio State wins at Washington by 3 touchdowns. Ohio State's defense comes in there, brings it to Washington. Although they got a great running game, Ohio State's defensive line, along with their linebackers, led by Sonny Styles, and that core, I feel like their run stop defense is going to hold it up against Washington, and then Julian Saint, Jeremiah Smith, Carnell Tate. Julian Saint's going to work his magic with Bennett Christian, Carnell Tate, Jeremiah Smith. Throw the deep balls, throw the short bombs, throw those passes where the Washington secondary can't get them. And then, there's that easy touchdown to win the game against Washington. So that's just kind of my 2 cents right now at the moment for that game. I was going to say that my thoughts on it on Thursday, but I figured I'd spoil it for tonight's show. And then I did want to make a brief statement to you, Mark. I've been hearing a lot of the big red fans on X and whatnot, referring to the fans of Minnie Hutt and like her fan base, Nebraska, talking about how Nebraska is at this turning point where they feel like this is the turning point in their program's history, where Dylan Raiola is this like chosen quarterback, like he's going to save their program, like he's their main guy. When I said this to Nebraska fans over the last week, until you beat Ohio State and until you actually win the Big Ten title, I don't want to hear any of it coming from Nebraska fans specifically, because they overhype him like he's some $19 million deal that Nebraska signed, like he came out of the Peyton Manning, quarterback academy, when really he's just the overrated copycat of Patrick Mahomes. I mean, I'm just being fair. Okay. I'm not trying to disrespect him, but I'm just saying, I just can't stand. They're just arrogant. Now, speaking as an Ohio State fan, I get that they've been through this drought, but I just really can't stand their fans talking this much. And I said it to Pitt Snipe, a fellow Husker fan. I said it to Husker Nation. Now, Minnie, you say step carefully. Well, I'm going to say this as an Ohio State fan. I can step wherever the heck I want and wherever I want. And I don't care what Nebraska fans say. Until they prove it and they beat Ohio State, they win the Big Ten title, I don't want to hear it. We know how that goes down. Ohio State beats Nebraska at Nebraska or at home in the Horseshoe. It don't matter. Ohio State's defense is that elite, and they've proven it time and time again. I don't need to remind anybody else on this network, Mark. Do I really? No.
All right. I would say this, Caden. I don't necessarily disagree with anything that you said about Ohio State and Washington or Alabama and Georgia. I would simply say one thing is that this vaunted Georgia defense was torn to shreds in the deep passing game by Tennessee. So that's something that they need to address. All right. So to this last rant on Nebraska. So you got to understand, Caden, when Nebraska fans or any fan base is anticipating or expecting their team to break out, that's kind of difficult for them to do. If they're going to be letting us know that they are excited, that they're enthusiastic, that they're hopeful, that they've got a good coach, got a good program, and they're putting something together, well, they're going to tell us that before they actually do it. They're going to let us know that they've got hope and optimism for the future before it actually occurs. That's being a fan. That's having faith in your team.
Yeah, I get that on their part, Mark, but it just, like I've said, until they actually beat Ohio State, that caliber of a team, and they actually prove that they are an elite team in the Big Ten, I don't want to hear case closed with Nebraska fans as far as I'm concerned. So you go tell Nebraska fans the exact message I told them. I told you, Pit Snipe, and Mark. That's all you're going to hear about Nebraska fans as far as I'm concerned.
You may not want to hear it, but you're going to hear it.
They won't. They don't want to hear it because they know that it's the truth. They know it's the truth deep down. That's the truth. So I don't need to tell them anymore because their fan base is full of egos that are really out of their heads, and they really need to get slapped down back to reality, which is the most I could say to them as an Ohio State fan and as someone who has listened to Nebraska fans over and over and over constantly on social media. You know how many messages I've been seeing floating around their little group chats for the last week, not even months, about this kid. I swear to you, Mark, it is annoying, and I'm being completely honest. So, like I've said, until they beat Ohio State, they win the Big Ten title, and they win a national championship, I don't want to hear it. Am I crystal clear about it?
Well, again, you can make those statements, but you're going to hear it if they feel like talking about their football team.
That's fine, Mark. That's fine. Their ego, their arrogance is basically their demise. I'm just going to say that plainly. Their arrogance is their demise. I've said it about Notre Dame fans. I've said it about Jackson Johnson's fan base at Alabama. I've said it about Michigan fans. Their arrogance is what's leading to their demise. I've said it before. I've said it again. Do I need to make myself clear? Or do I make my point clear enough?
I believe we've received it just fine.
You know what, Mark? I don't even need to come on here and arguing why. So you know what? Have a great night, Mark, and go Bucks and Nebraska.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So yeah, I don't even know what all of that means. Caden loves to do his predictions. He's never said anything that really backed up any kind of true analysis, any kind of knowledge of these teams. I've never been able to detect like a glimmer, a little smidgen of knowledge of any of these teams. He just kind of throws out a prediction. Great. You're all welcome to come on here and give predictions. His predictions are meaningless. They don't mean anything, but that's fine. He can give his predictions. Okay, when it comes to Nebraska, I can understand the Nebraska fan in a few different ways. Number one, they have a brilliant football tradition and football history, and you can call it prehistoric, you can call it recent. It depends on your perspective. As recently as the early 2000s, Nebraska football was riding high. Certainly through 1998-99. And they were still playing in the final two Big 12 championship games. So this is a proud tradition and program for years and years and years. And I think we can all, or some of us can empathize with a group of fans that have lost that for a period of time now. For a long period of time, they've been down. So they are waiting for the Renaissance. They are waiting for the next era of great Nebraska football. And after making largely 4 consecutive 4 consecutive bad coaching hires. They believe they've hired the right guy. I'm not completely convinced of it, but I would lean heavily in Matt Rule's direction as being that kind of coach, having the ability, the organizational skills, the people skills, the football skills, all of it to turn this program around and build it. And it's not like we haven't seen any evidence of it. We have. So this program is in much, 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 much better condition than it was when Matt Rule took it over. Now they need to take the next steps. They need to display this on the field. They have taken baby steps on the field. They have turned out wins against the likes of Rutgers and those types of opponents, Boston College in a bowl game. They've shown us baby steps. Then they came out against Michigan on Saturday, and they pretty much played the level of game that I expected them to. I did not think that long about who I was going to predict to win that game. That long, that much thought. Michigan's winning, and they'll cover the small margin of a point spread. And was it a close football game? Well, Michigan fans would tell you no. I'm sure Nebraska fans would tell you that it was razor close. I would tell you something in between, that Michigan was decidedly the better team, but it was still in doubt. Nebraska had the opportunities to steal that game late. So it was 30-27. So it's a disappointing loss for Nebraska for many of the fans. It depends if you run into a glass half full or a glass half empty type of Nebraska fan. The glass half empty fan is going to just wallow in, here we go again. We're losing 1-score games. This is what we do. This isn't going to change. It's not changed. But the Nebraska half full, glass half full fan would point to a decent performance against what I believe is a top 15 team in the country. And by the way, it's funny that our caller would pick on Dylan Raiola because I don't know if that wasn't the best game he's played in college. He had to fight a pretty ridiculous pass rush for the bulk of that game, and I thought he acquitted himself extremely well. So you can go either way on Nebraska. That's probably the bottom line. There's no definitive, if somebody was going to come on here and try to pontificate the grandeur of Purdue football, well, now's not really the time to do it. We've got no indication that Purdue is going to be any good anytime soon. Or if you came on here to diss, one of the top programs in the country, let's say Ohio State or Oregon, well, you would have little room to do that. Nebraska's in this middle state that we could focus on the negative, we can focus on the positive. I know that I got hit with a statistic on Saturday afternoon that I thought was inconceivable. I don't know if Minnie's cheering me on or she's insulting me. I don't know what's going on there. So I came across this stat, and this is just troubling, alarming. Nebraska has lost 28 consecutive games against ranked opponents. 28 straight games against ranked opponents. So let's take that a little deeper, because the next thing I thought, as my brain works in processing the information and not just saying, okay, that sucks, they suck, that's it. Okay, who are generally these opponents that Nebraska is losing to 28 consecutive times? So let's understand, this is not Georgia, this is not Alabama, this is not Ohio State, this is not Clemson playing playoff games every year, multiple playoff games, and those being a lot of the losses to the number 1 team in the country, the number 5 team in the country, fill in the blank. This is not in a Big Ten that featured 2 divisions. This is not Penn State, Michigan, Ohio State losing games against each other as ranked opponents. This, I bet if we went through the game logs of the last 6 or 7 years, because I'm guessing that Nebraska last beat a ranked team, if it's 28 consecutive games, they probably play 4 a season, something in that range. They've done this for 7 consecutive years, have not defeated a ranked opponent. So we're not talking, there's a couple Ohio State games there. There's a couple Michigan games there. Other than that, that's all Iowa, Minnesota, Wisconsin. That's most of that. 28 straight? And I'm going to guess. I'm going to estimate, it's not a guess. I'm going to estimate that half of those games are against those 3 teams. Iowa, Wisconsin, and Minnesota. Wow. Now, does that reflect on the current coach and program? Only for the games that they're responsible for. And certainly Matt Rule took over a mess. And so he's responsible for the wins and losses in the first season, but there should be some understanding of having to take time to work through that. And again, I believe that Nebraska is taking baby steps. I just don't know if they're going to break through. I don't know. We will all just wait and see, as they say. I do not have a strong prediction for Nebraska football going forward. I don't think that this team, and I said this before they lost to Michigan, I said this before they played it down this year, and then I just confirmed it after they played Cincinnati and won by a field goal, and I just confirmed it after they played Michigan. This is not that good a football team. They're okay. They're all right. They're like the 40th best football team in America. They're not that good. Again, I prepped everyone for, is Nebraska a good football team this year? I don't believe so, but their record may say that they are, and we still may see that. They play light schedule in the Big Ten. They've won all their non-conference games. So, yeah, if they go 5-4 in the Big Ten, they go 8-4. I think that's what this kid picked them to finish. Are Nebraska fans going to be happy with that? Well, based on what I saw out of Nebraska fans in the preseason and what they were predicting, I would say that they would be okay with it. So I will stay with my 8-4 prediction. But there are a lot of 8-4 or some 8-4 teams this season, teams that will finish 8-4 that are really good football teams. Nebraska is not one of them. But they're a decent team. They're a decent team. We will be watching a lot of games in the Big Ten over the course of the next 2 months that will show us otherwise. But up until then, we will consider Nebraska to be in a bucket with Minnesota and Iowa, and maybe Washington, maybe Michigan State, maybe Rutgers, maybe Illinois is not as good as we thought, or some people thought. So maybe they're in that middle pack. But that's what it is. That's what it is. Yes, there it is. I saw 0-28. Christopher says 0-29 against ranked teams in the Associated Press. There's the last win. 2016 against Oregon. If I'm not mistaken, Oregon was ranked at number 22. If I'm not mistaken, That Oregon team finished. Thank you for following up on that, Christopher. If I'm not mistaken, that Oregon team finished 4-8. Michael likes Oregon over Penn State 34-24, but I would not be surprised if something crazy happens like a blowout. Husker D, good to see you. Don't know if you agree with my rant. All right, let's run down the week 5 schedule before we call it a night. And again, we've got the call-in line in the chat. We just wrapped up a Florida State Virginia preview. So check out on the Florida State channel, great preview with my Florida State guys, James and George. And we also had Jackie Franchuli on from Wahoo's 247 Sports. And we'll put together the Arizona State interview tonight with Michelle Gardner, along with Melissa Treebwasser of TCU, put together in Arizona State and TCU. That's the doubleheader, by the way, on Friday. And Florida State's simply a 6.5 point favorite against Virginia, which would surprise a lot of people. Welcome to the Voice of College Football. We got Michael on the line.
Hey, Mark. Good evening, sir. How you doing?
I am doing just fine. How are you?
Not too bad. Hey, I got a question, and maybe you can figure this out from your time when you was with ESPN. A lot of people's complaining about Saturday night's games with Oregon, Penn State, and then Alabama and Georgia. They're being on both same time. How does that work anyway? And why would how does that work where they're both at the same time?
That the Oregon Penn State game's on at the same time as what?
Alabama, Georgia, both at 7:30 on Saturday night.
Yeah. Well, these are independent networks. They don't work together.
Mm-hmm.
That's
but
simply,
no,
so
go ahead, sorry.
This way. So I don't know, as I pull up the schedule, I don't know, and I used to know when I was working in the field what the television contract stipulated. So I don't know currently what the format is of the selection of the games, but I do know that Fox gets the first selection of Big Ten games. Not every week, but overall, they get the first selection. So
yeah,
they put together a conference call with all the Big Ten media rights holders, and they may actually do that with the Big 12 at the same time. I don't know how that works, or maybe they do it all at the same time. But anyway, they've got a big conference call, and let's say you got Fox there, CBS, NBC. Those are the three stakeholders for Big Ten football, along with the Big Ten network, and they work out their schedule. And they Fox has the most top selections. Like they've got the number one selection for the entire season. So what do you think has been the number one game on Fox for what's going to go on now 9 consecutive years? They take Ohio State and Michigan number one. And then it used to be when ESPN and ABC, Disney still had a stake of the Big Ten, then they actually got the number 2 game, and they would probably select Ohio State and Penn State, and then it would go back and forth. But now that ESPN's out of the Big Ten game, it works around with CBS and NBC. So I know that Fox gets the bulk of the top selections, but they don't get all of them. Case in point, this week, that Oregon Penn State is by far the most important game in the Big Ten and the most popular game in the Big Ten, but that's going to NBC. So I haven't delved into the contracts in terms of the specifics of them, but just know that Fox has the majority of the top picks. then it filters down to NBC and CBS. I don't think one of them is over the other. I think they have a equal amount of selections past Fox.
Mm-hmm. The reason I was asking because big new kickoff for Fox this week is USC and Illinois, and I wonder what made Fox choose that instead of Oregon Penn State.
Yeah, on the surface, it does not seem to make sense, but I bet if we looked it up, there would be, again, it's not like Fox gets their number one pick every week. They don't. They get it the majority of week. So if you notice, the television selections went out maybe about 3 to 4 weeks before the season started, and we all saw the notices that these games were being scheduled at these times, and they were random huge games. Again, like Ohio State, Michigan. Okay, Fox made that their selection, but the rest of the schedule's left blank, other than those few games that are selected before the season starts, and then about a week or so before the season started, then we got our TV schedule for the first 3 weeks of the season. And then after that, so for example, after we play this weekend, Monday, we will get the notification of the games that are selected and what networks, not for that Saturday, but for the next Saturday. It's always 2 weeks out, so people can plan. And that's how that works. But in terms of ESPN and Fox, or ESPN, NBC, CBS, they don't. So Fox, CBS, NBC cooperate with one another in terms of the Big Ten contract, but they don't cooperate with ESPN. And ESPN always puts its best game. When I say always, that's like 95% of the time, puts its best game on Saturday night on ABC.
Which is, I understand that. But no, I'm glad I see this. So even though this is Purdue's bye week, with him having Illinois coming in town a week from Saturday and stuff like that, which network do you think that might be a Big Ten network or a Peacock game? You think?
Well, let's look at the Big Ten schedule that week. We could probably figure it out. So,
okay.
The next week, you've got. All right, so this is week 6. Well, it's already been. Oh, yeah. So, like I was saying, this past Monday, they made the selections for this week, so we don't have to guess. We would have to guess the next week. But there you can see it right there. Illinois, Purdue's on the Big Ten Network.
Oh wow! Are you kind of surprised?
Am I surprised? Well, based on name brand and all of that, yeah, Michigan, Wisconsin, for as bad as Wisconsin is, that's still arguably the best game that's going to draw the highest ratings. That's why Fox got it. Then NBC picks up Ohio State, and then CBS gets the third selection with Penn State, UCLA. There's really none of the best teams are playing each other. Actually, the best game on the slate is probably Michigan State, Nebraska, just in terms of a competitive football game.
So you don't think Illinois? You think it'll be like Purdue's last 2 games in Illinois will win by at least 17 to 20 points?
Well, what I think is these networks make selections based on how many people are going to watch the game, not how good the game's going to be.
Okay, fair point too and stuff like that. That's what I was just trying to figure out and stuff. So I was trying to figure out because a lot of people complaining about why they have to be, but hey, it's beyond our pay grade. So
yeah, it's a pretty and again, I don't pretend to know anymore what the formula is. I used to, but I've not kept track of it. But I know generally how it works. And see the next weekend, we don't know.
Okay.
So there you go. So this Monday will be the decisions on and the announcement for these games.
Mm-hmm. Now, one follow-up question before I let you go, because I know you're probably and stuff like that. Now, can they pull and switch games like they do with the NFL? Say like you got, I'll take for example like the Colts and stuff like that. And they play the Rams this weekend in Los Angeles, so it could definitely be a 4 o'clock game. But say they was in Lucasville State in Minneapolis, and it was 1 o'clock. Can they pull and say, hey, instead of the 1 o'clock window, can we push it to the 4 o'clock?
Well, they're selecting these games and they're making the decision only 10 days, roughly 12 days before the game's played. So why would they make another change? No, that doesn't happen. No.
Okay, no, I was doing it. I've seen the NFL. I've seen but that's the NFL too, though. So I've seen them flex it to where they would move it to a different time and stuff.
Yeah, they flexed the last 3 weekends, something like that in the NFL.
I think so. I think so. I'm not sure. That's why I was asking. So
now you look at this schedule coming up. I'm gonna take a guess here. So the best game, the most popular game on the board is Michigan and USC. But it's in Los Angeles, so they're not playing at noon Eastern, so it's not going to be a Fox Big Noon game. And probably the second one is Indiana and Oregon from the standpoint of both name recognition and Indiana playing as well as they are. But that's also on the West Coast. So the big noon game is probably going to be Ohio State at Illinois, probably.
Mm-hmm.
And then I would guess that Indiana Oregon is going to be a 3:30 CBS game, and the Michigan USC game is going to be an NBC game at night.
You talking about for October 4th?
I'm sorry, I put up. Yeah, no, we're looking at October 11th. Yeah, I've got the right.
Okay.
There.
Okay. So you must be okay. I was just wondering stuff like that because I didn't know and stuff like that. So yeah, I'm looking at the schedule now too. So because they said that could be decided, but yeah, you're probably right about that though, because that would probably be a 3:30 kick for CBS. But no, because I was just wondering how they always did it and if they ever like switched it around sometimes like they did with the NFL. But I digress. So, but anyways, here as it always, I know tomorrow you'll probably be looking at your games that you'll be watching this weekend, but we'll talk about that tomorrow. Right. Thanks so much for taking my call, Mark. Good night.
Thank you.
Take care.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
All right. And then you notice the Friday night games. Those are set, the Thursday and Friday night games, before the season starts. So they've already selected networks and times, and they're only dealing, obviously, with a handful of games. All right. The real MVP is stopping by at the Voice of College Football.
Hey, Mark, how you doing this evening?
I'm good. What's up?
I'm doing good. Not a whole lot happened last week that was interesting or exciting to me. Like everything I thought happened was going to happen, except Texas Tech blew out Utah. That was the only really major shocking thing. Mark, this week I believe is Ticket Punch week for 3 games in particular: LSU, Ole Miss, Oregon, Penn State, and Alabama, Georgia. If whoever wins the Oregon, Penn State, and Ole Miss, LSU game, they're in the playoffs. I don't see them losing the minimum or the maximum amount of games in order to be in. And if Georgia wins, they're in. They're not losing 2 or 3 games.
Okay, I agree with Oregon, Penn State. What's the other game that you think is a ticket punching game?
LSU, Ole Miss.
Really? You don't?
Yeah, I think if either of them go 9-3, they're in the playoffs.
Ole Miss at 9-3 with no non-conference games.
They did beat Tulane. They destroyed Tulane.
Yes, they beat Tulane. I'm not completely sold on Ole Miss at 9-3.
That's fair. And it's also hard to find them going 9-3. Just their schedule real quick: Washington State at Georgia, at Oklahoma, South Carolina, Citadel, Florida at Mississippi State. So if they beat LSU, they're probably going 10-2.
Yeah.
At worst case scenario. So maybe I'll revise it and say if they win this game, the odds of them going 9-3 is so small that it would be a lot. Now they can blow a game like they did last year in 2 games, but I just don't see it happening this year for them. And LSU, if they win this game, obviously if they've got the Clemson win, they're going to beat a good Ole Miss team on the road. their resume is just so good this early on compared to anyone else that they would be in. Oregon, Penn State, I mean, they're not losing 2 games. The winner of this game is not losing 2 games because the Big Ten is just such a bad conference from like 6 to 18 that you can't lose those games if you're a top team. And then if Georgia beats Alabama, you look at the remaining of Georgia's schedule, the only for their caliber team they play is Texas the remaining of the way. So they're not going to lose the minimum amount of games.
All right. Well, I think looking at LSU's schedule, that everything you're saying is reasonable, but I do think that the college football can get crazy, and there is a possibility that LSU loses 3 out of, let's say, South Carolina, Vandy, Texas A&M, Bama, Arkansas, and Oklahoma. That's not out of the question.
Oh, I agree with that. I just believe a 9-3 LSU team would still get in the playoff over most 10-2 teams because of the conference they're in, their schedule, and their out-of-conference win against Clemson. Now, I know Clemson's not good at all, but their intent to schedule does matter.
Yeah.
So.
Yes. In my estimation, the intent on scheduling should be something that we talk about in patting programs on the back, but it should not come into play in evaluating teams.
Correct. But you compare them against a 10-2 Penn State, a 10-2 Indiana, somebody like that who has chosen to play absolutely nobody. Sure. I'm giving the nod to LSU.
Oh, well, yeah, because even if Clemson goes 6-6, they're a better football team by far than anyone that those teams played. So intent or not, it's still a decent win. It's just not what we thought it was.
Right. Another one, just to throw it out there, is a 9-3 LSU team. If they beat Texas A&M, Notre Dame 10-2 didn't beat Texas A&M, I'd put LSU in. They've got the direct comparison against a common opponent. They play a much tougher schedule than Notre Dame because Arkansas is terrible because they blew a game against Memphis. Boise State's not that good. LSU's a clear in over Notre Dame, despite the 1-game difference as well.
I would need to dig a little deeper, but I agree with your logic, and that's most likely where I would stand on that as well.
Okay. And in terms of the G5 race, it's to me to appear all but be locked up. Tulane is clearly in the driver's seat right now. They basically win their conference they're in, unless they lose like 2 or 3 games. If they are 11-1 or 12-0, they're in, as long as they win their conference, because they've beaten Duke and Northwestern. I know they had a bad loss to Ole Miss, so they can only go 11-1, but still, Ole Miss is in the SEC. They're a really good team. The committee's going to look past that since they're 2-1 against P4 opponents. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, it certainly would have helped them to play a competitive game against Ole Miss. And based on how I look at things, if Ole Miss is a 10-2, safely in the door in the clubhouse playoff team, then if Tulane loses that game 35-21, then it's actually to their credit, but obviously they got hammered.
Correct. The thing is, when comparing against G5 teams, they're just not a whole lot of G5 teams that are willing to schedule 2, much less 3 P4 opponents, and especially win against two P4 opponents. And I think that's going to be such a high quality mark for them that I honestly don't know what other team other than Tulane would currently be selected in for that spot right now, to be honest with you.
No, it's a good point because nobody in the MAC was able to pull that off. We thought that maybe Toledo could do that, but they lost to Kentucky.
Yeah, they're out. They lost to Western Michigan last week, 14-13.
Yeah, that's right. What other G5 teams have defeated a decent, when I say decent, I'm not even talking high level power conference team. They could be in this discussion that could put, to your point, put their win or wins up against Tulane's.
Yeah, I have.
I don't think they exist.
Right. I have absolutely no idea.
That team doesn't exist. So yeah, Tulane, even though I do think it would lock it up with a decent performance had they done that against Ole Miss, they shouldn't be penalized because nobody else is scheduling Ole Miss to get beaten down by 5 touchdowns, and then also with the 2 power conference wins. Yeah, I'm scanning around.
USF is probably the closest.
Yeah, with the Florida win. Yeah.
But they also have the penalty of getting absolutely killed by a good team. And they have one less P4 opponent.
Yep.
Especially that P4 opponent being from the Big Ten. Now, I know Northwestern's probably not going to be a good team, but I don't think they're the 18th best team in the Big Ten. I don't think they're the worst team in the Big Ten. So I do think just beating a Big Ten team's going to help them out along the way. So with that being said, Mark, I think by the end of this week, we're basically going to know half the playoff field, which is kind of crazy to think about. But like, you're going to have Ohio State's already in because they beat Texas. Tulane's in because they're just absolutely dominant. LSU, Ole Miss winner, Oregon, Ohio State winner, and then if Georgia beats Bama, there, and that's 5 teams. Only 4 weeks through the season. And we already know, basically, barring some wild circumstance, they're in. I'm not even including teams like Texas or the loser of these games.
Yeah. Well, you're making some assumptions there. Ohio State, even if they so you're counting them in right this second, and they're going on the road to Washington, Illinois, they got Penn State, they got Michigan.
Oh my goodness, they got Illinois. Oh my gosh, they got a team that got killed by Indiana. Oh, so scary.
I know, but things happen and teams come out differently. Back to this American Conference deal, South Florida and Tulane do not play, but then they would play in the conference championship game.
That would be interesting. That would be a good game. That'd be like the Mountain West last year between Boise State and UNLV, basically.
Yeah, so that could decide it right there.
That probably will decide it. There's no other conference that's even close in my estimation. I know North Texas got a nice win against Washington State, but with how bad Washington State is, I don't even know where we even categorize them anymore.
Well, that's unless Memphis, of course, gets the job done.
That's true, but I don't know how we're comparing Memphis, who's only beaten one, and they did beat a decent, I think, SEC 3-5, 2-6, 4-4 an SEC team versus 2 level ACC and Big Ten opponents. I don't know where that categorization is going to be end up. I also don't know. I can look it up who Memphis plays.
Well, I'm looking at it right now, and it's not much going to matter because they did win that game, and they've got both South Florida and Tulane on the schedule.
Okay, so this is one of those things where this literally will all sort itself out by the end of the year.
Yep.
Oh,
it should.
Shout out to the American Conference, by the way, for having probably the 3 best G5 programs this year.
Yeah.
Like, after them losing the 4 to the Big 12, BYU, Cincinnati, UCF, and Houston, a lot of people thought they would die and go away. They seem like they just filtered in and are still the class of the G5. I mean, that's remarkable for the American Conference, Mark.
It is. Not BYU, of course, but I get the point. The other 3, yes.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Good point. I'm with you.
Yeah, that's all I got for you, Mark. I will see you when the Alabama Crimson Tide upsets the Georgia Bulldogs.
Okay. Thanks, DeReal. All right, and the final call of the night, we're going to talk some Nebraska football, I'm guessing, with Husker Nation.
Mr. Rogers, how are you, sir?
I am doing well. What's going on?
Hello? Can you hear me all right out there?
Yes, got you. How are you?
Right, Mr. Mark Rogers, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Can
Everyone
he hear
in
me?
the chat, let the caller know, Husker Nation know that we can hear him. We can hear you. Thumbs up.
Hold on. I'm trying to hear you here, Mr. Rogers. Got some audio problems.
Okay.
Well, if you can hear me, Mr. Rogers, I got a question for you.
Okay.
If Nebraska goes 8-4 this year, do you believe that Dylan Royola will leave Nebraska football and transfer?
Oh, will he transfer? So why are we basing that so much on a record? Well, I guess you can't hear me. Can you hear me? Yeah, I think that's a complex question. I don't know the dynamics between Dylan Raiola and Matt Rule. Dylan Raiola.
Well, I guess my question is, Nebraska is supposed to be this huge winning team.
Okay. So Husker Nation, if you can hear me, call back some other time when we can communicate. Let's do that.
Buddy.
All right. We appreciate you being here. So somebody leave that in the chat. I'll leave that in the chat. Husker Nation, call back when you can hear me. Can I spell? There we go. Okay, folks, that's enough for me. That's enough for you. We've been here for another night of college football discussion. We'll be back on Thursday and Friday night. I got to admit, I don't know exactly what time, but we do have a game on Thursday. We've got two pretty decent games on Friday with TCU and Arizona State, and then the Florida State-Virginia game. But check your local listings for updated times, and we will see you on Thursday and Friday.